Hey everybody, it's great to see you today. Today is August 10th and this is Living Power, your online Bible study. I'm actually taping outside today on the porch. It's a beautiful day and Caesar was out here, and so I thought we would just do a quick taping outside together today. We are in the book of Jeremiah and we're looking at chapters 16 to 18, and again, you know, Jeremiah is receiving and then communicating a message from the Lord about the impending doom of Jerusalem. And there are some wonderfully positive messages in all of this. One of them is found in Jeremiah 17, verse 7. But blessed are those who trust in the Lord and have made the Lord their hope and confidence. I absolutely love that verse, and I wanted to start off reminding you of that wonderful promise today. The reading kind of had some hard concepts in it, don't you think? First of all, when God told Jeremiah not to pray for Jerusalem, that was hard. That was in yesterday's reading. And then today, in 16:5, I've removed my protection. I've taken away my unfailing love and mercy. I just wouldn't want that on anyone. Would you? I mean, that's just hard. And then 16:17, I'm watching them closely. I see every sin. And we do know, of course, the Lord is always with us. We cannot escape Him no matter how high, no matter how low in the depths of the ocean we go. We can never escape the love of the Lord. There are two very important theological points that are kind of underpinning the reading today, and I wanted to bring those to your attention. The first one is that man's heart is evil. And that's true. That's, from the time that we're born as sinners. Paul will help us understand more about that when we get to the book of Romans. But that concept is found in Jeremiah 17, verse 9. And the second one is found in 17, verse 10, that God rewards based on our good works, our deeds. He doesn't save based on good deeds, but He rewards. And based on the good deeds that we do in this earth, on this earth, during our lifetime, we will be rewarded. And we'll be talking about some of those rewards as we get kind of into the New Testament, where they're described a little bit better. Let me see. We see a couple of points in Jeremiah 17, starting with verse 11. And it has to do with Judah's sins. And you may think, well, how much longer are we going to be talking about this? Well, until the Lord tells us to stop talking about this. You know, it doesn't matter how many times we kind of retell the story, there's always something else we can glean from it. And let's just go through this really quickly. I think it's important. In Jeremiah chapter 17, in verse 1 and 2, the charge against them, of course, is idolatry. Verse 5, misplaced trust. They had placed their trust in their army, in their possessions, anything other than the Lord. Idols are a good warning to us, but so is misplaced trust. I really like thinking about that, making sure that our lives, we don't have that in our life, The third thing would be greed. That was in verse 11. That's another good one to remember. Verse 12 and 13 talks about turning back. We mentioned this, we just kind of touched the surface yesterday, and that's the whole concept of forsaking the Lord. There are people in this world, I hope not you, I know not me, that would forsake the Lord. And forsaking, what the root of this word means in Jeremiah 17, verse 12 and 13, in the Hebrew, the definition actually means abandon or leave behind. I looked that up particularly. And it means after we hear about the gospel, this is not we, but there are people that this happens to. They hear the message of the gospel. They hear the good news. And, they claim to be saved and they claim to be a Christian. But yet at some point, for whatever reason, they forsake the Lord and they make a conscious decision. This is what we were talking about yesterday, the once saved, always saved thing. There are people that make a conscious decision to forsake the Lord and go back, believing trusting, doing whatever it was before they came to hear the gospel. And those people are not saved. They cannot be assured of eternal life with Jesus and the Trinity in heaven. So you have to ask the question, well, maybe they weren't saved to begin with. It's not for me to answer. I don't know. We can't possibly know. I understand that point, though. Maybe they weren't saved to begin with at all. But there are people that turn back, abandon God, and just go back to their life as before. That's forsaking. Now that is directly in opposition to this the same word, and I did a cross-reference, and I looked to see where that word abandon or forsake is, but in reference to God. Here's what Psalm 37:25 says: God will never abandon the godly. Psalm 119:53, God is angry with those who reject His instructions. So that word forsake is the word for reject. This is just different translations I'm giving you here. And then one more, Isaiah 27:10, their houses were abandoned and overgrown with weeds. Now there's a real easy picture. Picture a house that's overgrown with weeds, kind of looks like a ghost house or whatever, it's spooky, hasn't been lived in for years. That word abandoned is the same word for forsake. So it's that kind of forsaking that would imply that that person either A, wasn't ever saved to begin with, but B, certainly can't be assured of salvation in the future. The fifth sin in chapter 17 is rejecting the messengers. And didn't we read this week where one of the kings actually tore up Jeremiah's scroll that he had written? Remember, I think it was Baruch, the writer. Oftentimes prophets had scribes. I know Paul had a scribe that wrote for him. He didn't write all of his letters. He had somebody write for him. So Jeremiah did too. And the king just didn't like what God had to say, so he tore up the scroll and he threw it in the fire. And the prophets, they killed the prophets too. They wanted to hear what they wanted to hear. They wanted the prophets to tickle their ears instead of telling them really what God had for them to say. Number 6, profaning the Sabbath. And that's in verse 19 to 27. And here again we have a reminder to make the Sabbath day a holy day. It's supposed to look different. We're supposed to be different. It's supposed to be a day of rest and worship for the Lord. It's just supposed to be different. So the reading today ended in Jeremiah 35 with the story about the Rechabites. And I don't know about you, but before this study, I didn't know too much about the Rechabites. So I did some in-depth study, and it's actually pretty interesting. The Rechabites are descendants of this man named Rechab, R-E-C-A-B. And Rechab was related to Moses' father-in-law. Okay, so remember Moses left Egypt and he went into Midian and he met Zipporah and he married her. Well, that family would have been the Rechabites. And the Rechabites in Jerusalem at the time of our reading, you could consider them a separatist clan within the nation. They accompanied Israel into Palestine with Moses. And you remember a long time ago in the book of Exodus, we read about that there were people accompanying the Israelites into the Promised Land, and as they were moving through the wilderness, these people would have been those people. Jonadab is the son of Rechab, and he started this whole thing I'm about to tell you. He commanded his descendants to be nomads. A nomad is someone that wanders in the wilderness, doesn't live in a city. That was requirement number one. Could not own land, didn't settle down, didn't drink wine. Jonadab was a zealous worshiper of Yahweh, true to the faith, didn't worship Baal, didn't get into any of that idolatry. He helped Jehu, remember he was the good king of Judah, tear down the Baal worship and the Asherah poles and all that. This this descendant, Jonadab, helped Jehu do all that. So he was a very good ally. And a group of Rechabites came to Jerusalem to live in this city because they needed to escape Babylon. So they weren't going against their predecessor, Jonadab, who was kind of like the father of their clan, so to speak. But for generations, these people had just honored the commands of this man, Jonadab, and they hadn't lived in cities, and they didn't drink wine and all this. So, now that you know that, you can understand why God brought them into the whole thing. Because God is making a point that if, number one, He's making a point that if this group can obey this man, then why can you not obey me? What he's saying is, the descendants of Rechab have done a better job at obeying the commands of their forefather Jonadab, at being nomads and not drinking wine and not having any land and not living in cities, than you have obeyed me as my people. Wow. That's what he is saying in this whole thing. And the point about the wine, God isn't saying that it's bad to drink wine. God is saying that if you personally have made a vow or committed not to do it, then you shouldn't do it. That's all he's saying here. And that's in Jeremiah 35. It's the section called The Faithful Rechabites. So I hope that will give you a little bit of understanding into why that's in there and who those people were. Well, we are going to quit for today, and we will continue next time. And I just wanted to thank you for being with me. It's my pleasure to bring you these lessons each and every day. Blessings to you and your family. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day until we meet again. Shalom.